What's up, movie fans? Guys, ever since Spider-Man Brand New Day came out, I have been in a massive Spider-Man mood. And it occurred to me, I have somehow never made a video where I have ranked every Spider-Man movie villain, which is surprising because the villains are one of my favorite things to talk about with pretty much all of these movies. I just love Spider-Man's Rogues Gallery. It's one of the greatest rogues galleries of any superhero, and throughout his cinematic history, we have just gotten so many really kooky, unique Spider-Man villain adaptations, and I wanted to do a video talking about all of them. So today, I am going to be ranking all 15 live-action Spider-Man movie villains from the worst to the best. Now, before we get into the ranking, two things that I just want to say. First off, spoilers. There will be spoilers in this video for every live-action Spider-Man movie, including Brand New Day. And second off, in Spider-Man Brand New Day, there are several villains who just kind of have little cameos in the montage at the start of the movie, and I decided that for this list, I'm not going to be including any of those characters because they're just little cameos. I don't really know what I would say about them. I'm just including the villains who are actually actively involved in the movie. With that being said, let's get into the ranking, starting with number 15, the worst Spider-Man movie villain, Rhino, from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I truly just have absolutely no idea what they were even going for with this character. For one thing, he's barely even in the movie. He just shows up once at the start of the movie outside of the Rhino suit, and once at the end of the movie in the Rhino suit, and his characterization throughout the two scenes he appears in is basically just Paul Giamatti yelling something or other.
Say hello to Alexei Sintsevich!
He's just a very angry Russian dude who Spider-Man makes fun of. And then when he gets in the Rhino suit, it's just like a bizarre adaptation of the Rhino suit, where it's like this military mech suit, and it has like guns and missiles all over it. Like, I was just not a fan of anything that they did with this character in the little time that he had in TASM 2. So I think he is easily the worst live-action Spider-Man villain. Number 14, Venom from Spider-Man 3. I honestly think I forgot until I rewatched this movie just how terrible its adaptation of Venom is. I'm not a fan of how this movie uses the symbiote because it just makes it very silly by having Peter like become all emo and do these weird white boy dances, and so I've just never really been a fan of how like weird this movie treats the symbiote. And then when Eddie gets the symbiote and becomes Venom, he is not a threatening or menacing villain at all. If anything, he's super cringy with the lines that he says and the way that Topher Grace delivers them.
Ooh, my spider sense is tingling. If you know what I'm talking about.
He was just not the right person for this role.
I like being bad. It makes me happy.
He just comes across as this, like, pathetic little twerp. And for some reason, throughout the entire third act of the movie, he keeps peeling off the Venom mask. What's the point of even having it? So, yeah, I'm just not a fan of this movie's version of Venom. I really hope one day we can get a Spider-Man movie that has him fighting an actually good version of Venom. Number 13, Harry Osborn Green Goblin from The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So Harry Osborn is actually the only character on this list who's going to be showing up twice since there are 2 different adaptations of him. I honestly wish that the Amazing Spider-Man movies didn't even bother adapting Harry Osborn, because what we have here with Dane DeHaan's Harry Osborn is basically just a worse version of what we got with James Franco's Harry Osborn. He's just an incredibly rushed version of the character where he just shows up in the movie out of nowhere. It turns out that Peter Parker was friends with Harry Osborn this whole time, even though that is somehow never mentioned in the first TASM movie. And then from there, they just have this incredibly weird, convoluted storyline for how Harry turns against Peter, where, like, he needs Peter's blood to cure himself of, like, this weird genetic disease that the Osborns have, and it turns him into, like, this literal goblin creature. His motives just don't really make any sense, because he's like, I don't have any time for you to make sure that your blood is safe. I need it now. His dad died when he was, like, old, so he has, like, multiple decades before he's going to die from this illness. He's only in the goblin suit for like 5 minutes at the end of the movie. I don't know. I thought this was like a total misfire, just an infinitely worse version of the character than what we got in the Raimi trilogy. He does kill Gwen Stacy, so I guess I have to give him points for being like one of the most evil villains on this entire list and committing one of the most evil acts, but still, he's just kind of a lame villain. Number 12, Scorpion from Spider-Man Brand New Day. I was incredibly disappointed by this character. We got set up for the Scorpion all the way back in Spider-Man Homecoming nearly 10 years ago, where that movie ended with a post-credit scene where they teased that Michael Mando was going to be playing Scorpion, and that is an awesome tease because Scorpion's an iconic Spider-Man villain. Michael Mando is an amazing actor who I love from Better Call Saul, so like that's really exciting. And then they proceeded to not do anything with it for nearly 10 years. They didn't bring him back in any of the sequels, to the point where like even Michael Mando started saying in interviews, I don't really know what's going on. Like, I thought I was coming back eventually. And then they finally bring him back for Spider-Man Brand New Day. They finally follow up on the tease. And he's in the movie for like maybe 5 minutes as a side villain who is brainwashed by Jean Grey for most of the scenes that he's in. Like, I just thought that was really, really disappointing. They don't necessarily do anything bad with him. He's fine, but I was just hoping for so much more with this character, and what we got kind of bummed me out. Number 11, the Shocker from Spider-Man Homecoming. I don't necessarily have any big problems with him. He's just not really anything that remarkable. He does essentially just function as a punching bag henchman villain for Peter to fight. That's pretty much it. Like, he doesn't really have any, like, deep motivations of his own. He's just one of Vulture's henchmen who Peter beats up at the end of the movie with help from Ned. And so, like, they don't necessarily do anything bad with him, but once again, he's just not that remarkable. I also think this is another case of missed potential well, because this is another case where I really like his actor, Bokeem Woodbine. I recently watched the show Fargo for the first time, and he plays Mike Milligan in Fargo, and he's one of my favorite characters in that entire show. So the fact that they used him as just kind of a minor side villain in Homecoming is just kind of disappointing. You should have given him a bigger role. He's a good actor. Alright, moving on. Number 10, William Metzger from Spider-Man Brand New Day. So this is a side character who is presented as an ally to Spider-Man for the first 2/3 of Brand New Day, and then in the last act of the movie, it is revealed that he is actually a villain, is pretty much responsible for everything that happened in the movie since he kidnapped Jean Grey's sister and did experiments on her until she literally died. So he is just an incredibly hateable villain who you really, really want to see get what's coming to him, but I can't really justify ranking him any higher on this list because he is just kind of a generic government figure. Like, he isn't really that deep or complex of a villain. He's just kind of this guy in a suit who's really, really evil. Once again, this is another case in, like, a long trio here of just missed potential with actors. I really, really like Tramell Tillman. That's Mr. Milchick in Severance. He is another amazing actor, and they just kind of wasted him on this generic businessman villain. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of a boring character. Alright, number 9, I have Electro from The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man No Way Home. I think now we're starting to get into the more interesting ones. Electro is a character who fascinates me because I did not like him in TASM 2. If we were just judging him based on TASM 2, I honestly don't know where he would have ranked on this list. He's just a very, very weird character in that movie where he's just like this awkward guy who has like social anxiety, and then he gets superpowers and gets mad when Spider-Man doesn't remember his name, so then he goes crazy. Like, it's just an incredibly weird villain. I think Jamie Foxx's performance in TASM 2 just isn't really that remarkable. It's kind of over the top and strange, and so I didn't really like him in that movie. Spider-Man No Way Home, I think, improved Electro quite a bit, where in that movie they made the character a little bit more grounded, and they gave Jamie Foxx the opportunity to make him feel like an actual human, and as a result, I actually liked him a lot more in No Way Home, and I thought that his motivations made a little bit more sense. He had a lot of great moments with Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield's Peters. I still can't put him too high because I didn't like him in TASM 2, but I do think No Way Home improved him quite a bit. Number 8, Lizard from The Amazing Spider-Man and No Way Home. I feel like Lizard is a villain who I've been a little bit hard on in the past, where like I said that I thought he was just kind of a goofy, silly villain who I couldn't take seriously. On rewatch, I actually liked him in TASM a little bit more, where I kind of like paid more attention to his motivations, and I understood, okay, he's this scientist who like just wanted to help people who have lost limbs like him, and he ended up turning himself into a monster. There's an interesting layer to that. I think that Rhys Ifans' performance is mostly pretty good. I still can't entirely take him seriously after he becomes the Lizard, because like, deeper motivations behind it or not, his plan is still he wants to turn the entire city's population into lizards. It's a very, very silly cartoon villain plan. And honestly, No Way Home doesn't fix him at all. I actually think No Way Home kind of makes fun of his plans at the end of TASM.
You know I can give you a real makeover.
Let me guess. Into a lizard?
Exactly. You two just shut up.
So, yeah, I don't know. I can't really justify putting him any higher up on this list. Number 7, Sandman from Spider-Man 3 and No Way Home. This is a character who I've always been a little bit conflicted on because I think there are elements to his character that are really, really good, but also elements that I've just never been that crazy about. Starting with the stuff that I'm not that crazy about, I don't like the fact that Spider-Man 3 retcons Peter Parker's origin by saying, oh, no, it wasn't a random mugger who killed Uncle Ben, it was actually Sandman. Peter basically killed this random guy in the first Spider-Man movie for no reason, because that guy didn't actually kill Uncle Ben. I just don't really like that. I think that devalues the first movie a little bit. I also just, don't really understand Sandman's motivations in Spider-Man No Way Home, where, in that movie, he's just trying to get home to his daughter, but then he, fights alongside Electro, who's trying to not go home, so that seems kind of counterintuitive. So, yeah, there's elements to the character that I don't really like that much. However, I think overall, he is a compelling villain, where he is this guy who isn't necessarily a bad person, he just felt desperate because his daughter was sick and he needed to find a way to pay for her treatment, and so he turned to a life of crime, did some things that he's not proud of, and I think that is interesting. I like the fact that by the time you get to the end of the movie and Peter kind of realizes what's going on with him, he actually empathizes with him. That is what Spider-Man should do. And then I also just think Sandman's powers are really, really visually interesting in Spider-Man 3. I love the way that they brought them to life. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things about Sandman's character that I really, really like. I like Thomas Hayden Church's performance. I like how he ties into the themes that Spider-Man 3 has about forgiveness. But I still think there are some elements with his character that I just can't really get past. Number 6, Harry Osborn from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. With this character, they actually took their time to develop him from Peter's best friend into a villain. At the start of the trilogy in Spider-Man 1, he's just Peter's kind of goofy best friend, but they do subtly set up that there are some things going on with him where he has daddy issues and all of that. Then after Norman dies, he starts to become vengeful towards Spider-Man, and that anger just festers throughout Spider-Man 2 until you get into Spider-Man 3 and he becomes a villain. I like that. I like the fact that they slowly developed him into a villain over the course of the 3 movies, and I also just really, really like James Franco's performance in Spider-Man 3. I think it is, incredibly interesting to have a villain who is just motivated by hate of Spider-Man. I think that his redemption arc is really, really good, and the way that his story ends is appropriately tragic and hits really, really hard. But Spider-Man 3 does fumble with his character in certain areas just because it's Spider-Man 3. It's a very, very messy movie. And so you do have things that are just very, very silly, like him bonking his head and getting amnesia, or his butler just randomly telling him that he has apparently known this whole time that Spider-Man was innocent and never said anything about it. Mostly good, but very flawed once again. Alright, now we're moving into the top 5. These are the really, really good ones. And starting us off at number 5, I have Jean Grey from Spider-Man Brand New Day. So I will fully admit, I think Jean Grey was a little bit of an odd choice as the villain of a Spider-Man movie. Like, it's weird to take an iconic X-Men character and make her the villain of a Spider-Man movie. Like, it's kind of random. And so I understand why people have a problem with that. With that being said, I still really, really like Jean Grey as a villain and as an adaptation of the character. I think it is interesting that throughout the first half of Brand New Day, she is presented as just this pure evil villain who is willing to, like, take control of people, put them in mortal danger, possess MJ just to, like, emotionally manipulate Peter, and, like, throughout the first half of the movie, you just really do not like her. She is just an incredibly menacing, unlikable character. And then you get to a point in the movie where it actually gives you her backstory, and suddenly you feel sympathetic for her, like you feel bad for her. She probably has the most reasonable motivation on this entire list, where, like, Damage Control kidnapped her sister for no reason and did experiments on her until she died. Like, that is terrifying that she had, like, the person she cared about most taken away from her. And so I think it is interesting that they were able to make her a menacing, threatening antagonist, but then they were also able to make you care about her. They were able to have Peter, like, empathize with her, help her realize that this isn't the way to go about letting her anger out and all of that. Like, yeah, I did really, really like all of that, and I am excited to see Jean in future MCU projects. I think that this movie ended on a note that is going to, like, make her a very interesting character with a very good redemption arc in the future. Number 4, Mysterio. I swear I forgot how good Mysterio is as a villain until I rewatched Spider-Man Far From Home. He is just such a great antagonist. I think he is probably the most purely hateable Spider-Man villain, where, like, it's kind of hard to pick up on a lot of the things that he does in this movie the first time you watch it, since he is meant to be kind of a twist villain. But upon rewatch, you just realize how manipulative so much of the stuff that he does in the first half of this movie is, where, like, pretty much every action he takes is supposed to make Peter feel inadequate.
I actually really like him.
Can I be completely honest with you?
Please.
They look really stupid.
Oh.
it's supposed to make him feel like he is not worthy of having these glasses, and it's supposed to make Peter trust him so that he will be willing to give the glasses to Mysterio, and it just like makes him such a smug villain who you just like really don't like once the reveal happens. And then beyond that, he is just such an evil character where he is entirely devoted to trying to make people look up to and worship him by turning himself into a hero and causing an Avengers level threat. And he doesn't care how many people die in the process. I think Jake Gyllenhaal's performance is amazing. He just manages to make this guy such a menacing character who you just really want to see get brought down. And then the other amazing thing about Mysterio is, in the end, even though he literally dies, he still finds a way to win by revealing Peter's identity to the world and becoming one of the people who kind of ruined the life of MCU Spider-Man. And so, yeah, I just love so much of what they did with his character. I'm not crazy about his motivations. I don't love the fact that they made him like this jealous, envious Stark employee. I just think that kind of treads on territory that we've already covered with like villains in the Iron Man movies and previous Spider-Man movies. But still, for the most part, I think he is an amazing villain. Number 3, Vulture from Spider-Man Homecoming. I think Vulture is such a beautifully simple villain, where, like, he's not this crazy grand antagonist who has, like, some sort of crazy villainous plan. He is literally just a guy. A normal, working-class New Yorker who felt like he was screwed over by a billionaire and turned to a life of crime to provide for his family. I think that is an incredibly interesting motivation for the main villain of a Spider-Man movie to have. I think a lot of his interactions with Peter, where he's trying to help Peter understand where he's coming from, I think a lot of that is just really interesting. And I also like the fact that even though he is this normal guy, he is still an absolutely ruthless villain who is willing to do anything to accomplish his goals. I think Michael Keaton's performance is amazing. He is just a super threatening, scary character.
Ever interfere with my business again? Because if you do, I'll kill you and everybody you love.
And I also love the plot twist with Vulture in this movie, where you find out towards the end that he is actually the father of Peter's crush, Liz. I still remember that reveal just blew my mind the first time I watched this movie. So yeah, Vulture is an amazing villain. Number 2, Dr. Octopus from Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man No Way Home. One of the most iconic Spider-Man villains of all time, and for very good reason. I think Doc Ock is honestly just everything that you want a Spider-Man villain to be. He starts out the movie as this sympathetic character who is just a scientist who is trying to change the world. He has a wife who he, like, legitimately cares about. He forms this sweet bond with Peter. He kind of becomes a little bit of a mentor figure towards him. And, like, you really like him. him and want to see him succeed. And then his experiment goes horribly wrong. It scrambles his brain, it kills his wife, and he goes crazy and becomes this supervillain. And throughout the rest of the movie, I think he's just an awesome villain. He is able to be a very, very threatening antagonist, but he's also just able to be a very, very fun character, in part because of how goofy and campy Alfred Molina's performance is. Like, there are just several moments in this movie where he just kind of comes across as like this silly little troll.
Butterfingers.
And then by the time you get to the end of the movie, his motivations tie into the movie's themes about letting go of the things that you want the most in order to make the world a better place. And like, yeah, I think in general, he is just an amazing, iconic Spider-Man villain. And I also really, really like what they do with him in No Way Home, where they kind of give you closure to his character by having him be cured of his mental issues and become that scientist once again. And so, yeah, just another absolutely fantastic villain. With that being said, you all know exactly who number one is. It is kind of crazy that we have had 20 years worth of Spider-Man movies. We've gotten 9 live-action movies, and yet no villain has even come close to topping Green Goblin from the original Spider-Man movie. He's just a perfect villain. He is one of the greatest comic book movie villains of all time. So many of the villains on this list, like Doc Ock or like the Lizard, are these sympathetic scientists who wanted to change the world and ended up turning themselves into monsters. Guess what? Green Goblin is the blueprint for that. He is the original version of that character, where in the original Spider-Man movie, he starts out as this sympathetic scientist, and then he goes crazy. But he is the perfected version of that formula because he's just more evil than any other Spider-Man villain. Like, after he goes crazy, he just becomes this complete lunatic who loves being evil and does terrible things with a smile on his face. What's so interesting about Green Goblin is that, like, every other villain on this list has, like, some sort of end goal or thing that they want to accomplish. With Green Goblin, he just wants to cause as much pain and suffering as possible. And that makes him an incredibly entertaining villain because of how fun and maniacal Willem Dafoe's performance is, but it also makes him a terrifying villain. Reminder, in No Way Home, he literally killed Aunt May just to punish Peter for being a good person. Like, he is such an evil character, and then he also has a sympathetic side to him since he does have a split personality and the real Norman Osborn is still there beneath the Goblin persona. Like, yeah, he is just a perfect villain, and he is easily the best villain that we have ever gotten in any Spider-Man movie. So there you go, that's my ranking of every Spider-Man movie villain. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Comment down below who is your favorite Spider-Man movie villain, and see ya, movie fans.